Joyous time zones. Joyous time zones. It's Sako and the Moon. Excuse me. And today we are talking about, let me try this again. We are Sako and the Moon. We are two self-publishing horror authors talking about craft, and we're going to talk about plot twists today.
And we're live.
And yes, we are live.
We are live.
Mostly because YouTube keeps slopping off the last part of our episodes.
The last one was kind of long, so that might have something to do with it. But it was like the best one we did. So
yeah, that's true too. The last one I finally got it to upload in its entirety, but the one with Kiri, thanks. The one with Kiri was only 20 minutes long.
Something
So I
like
had
that.
to finagle with that one too.
Always something.
Okay.
But we're live now. They can't do nothing to us.
This is where we explore the world of self-publishing in the horror genre. Today's episode, we are diving deep into the crafting, chilling plot twists. All right, let's get to it.
This is a whole episode about being Shyamalan.
Yeah, pretty much. I actually mentioned him. I mentioned him in the examples portion.
I mean, this is pretty much this is the Shyamalan episode. Mm-hmm. I use Shyamalan as a verb. To Shyamalan.
To Shyamalan. Yeah.
It's a verb now.
Yeah, it's a verb.
We're going to do intros at some point because it's still a new episode to somebody. I'm the Moon. I am the author of the Copper Week collection. I have a couple podcasts of my own. Most of them are wrestling related, and everything I talk about has something to do with wrestling. It all comes back to wrestling. Everything comes back to wrestling.
I'm Sako&theMoon. I'm also known as Cass Foyt, and I'm 3 times published. I write horror overtones with urban fantasy, I want to say. And I'm working on a bunch of stuff. So I'll be talking about all of that on another podcast. For sure.
She is so successful. She just can't even get it all
I can't fit it all under one umbrella. I really can't.
We try to keep it all under one Omni hat. I swear it's coming.
One hat.
I swear the Omni hat is coming.
The Omni
it's coming.
So good.
I don't know what I was going to say except for Omni hat. Maybe that's all I was going to say. It was Omni hat.
Okay, so to start, let's dive into the art of surprising and shocking readers with unexpected plot twists.
Let's better explain what a plot twist is. Exactly. The difference between like an ending and a plot twist.
Well, I feel like plot twists aren't just relegated to the ending.
Exactly, but I think a lot of people do think that, which is why I want to cover it.
Well, to surprise...
Go ahead.
Yeah, sorry. To surprise and shock readers with unexpected plot twists, start by building suspense, which we talked about last time, I believe.
Time before last. I think
before last.
I think the last time was characters.
Use foreshadowing and subtle hints to set expectations, keeping readers on their toes. Identify established tropes or predictable elements in the narrative, and then subvert these expectations with twists that defy conventional storytelling. The timing of these revelations is crucial. Unveil plot twists at strategic moments to maximize their impact. Well-timed surprises can shock and surprise readers, leaving a lasting impression on the overall narrative and creating a memorable reader experience.
Yeah,
So,
pretty much.
yeah,
Pretty thorough.
I just set up. I just set up the topic and then
And we roll. So
and
so again, the importance of a plot twist versus an ending is that, and it's one of the beautiful things about horror, that there are tropes, and by tropes, as a term kind of gets a bad rap. I think it kind of gets demonized, but it's like a standard. And if you want to compare it to another genre, it's like romance. I remember a time I walked into the house and my mother-in-law was watching Hallmark. I looked at the screen for about 3 minutes. And I said, "Oh, is this the part where he does this, does that?" She's like, "Oh, did you watch this before?" And I'm like, "No, it's every Hallmark movie. Every movie
every
is
Hallmark
exactly
movie.
the same. It's like a Mad Lib. Every Hallmark movie goes exactly the same way. That's a romance trope. But if you're writing romance and you don't do those things, it's basically rejected from the average romance reader because that's what they're looking for.
Because there are expectations. Right.
Right. So when you have the teen slasher, I'll talk about Scream a lot, so we'll talk about teen slashers. When you have teen slashers, there's certain rules to the horror movie, as Randy would say. And you have to follow these rules. And of course, in any kind of endeavor like this, if you know the course that your target's going to take, you know how to beat them around the corner. You know how to subvert their path, and that's essentially what a writer is doing with a plot twist.
Yep.
M. Night Shyamalan's a perfect example. Not even a perfect example. He's the example at this point.
He's the example.
Shyamalan is known for taking you down a path and then saying, "This is the ending that you think I've led you to. Congratulations, I'm all the way over here."
Yeah, The Sixth Sense was the revelation that the protagonist sees dead people that transforms the viewer's understanding of the entire story.
Yeah. So once you realize that the small child sees, I forget his name, sees dead people, you're like, all right, cool. That's going into the plot. Plot twist is the guy that he's been helping, the detective guy he's been helping himself is dead.
Yep.
And you're like, wait a minute, that's not right. That's not right. And of course, the important part is, I'm sure we'll get to this in more detail. The important part is if you're going to set up a plot twist, it's got to make sense. Because I have a really good example of a bad plot twist. We'll get into that. But
I know a bunch of those.
it's like the perfect example of a bad plot twist. And I can't do this episode without talking about it. But in time. But the kicker here is you go back and you watch, and there's like a whole scene where the kid walks into the apartment and he sees his mom sitting with the detective guy. And you just assume there was a conversation there. When you watch it back on second view, which is so important to the horror reader, horror watcher, the second viewing, the second reading, and you go back through and like, did they set this up? Was this in front of me the whole time? And you realize that no words were exchanged between this guy and anybody else who was alive. And you go back, you're like, whoa, this guy was dead. And how do we not know? And it's like, that's not what I was thinking. And that whole, it's not what I was thinking, that's the plot twist.
And that's what we're looking for. Yeah.
Because we can always watch the same thing and go the same route and have everything go out the same way it does. Every Scream movie, for the most part, goes about the exact same way. Scream 4 subverts slightly, but cool. And, there's a weird noise in the background. This is what happens when you're live. We can't edit anything out. There's a weird noise in the background. I'm just like, oh, that was unexpected. All right, cool.
Oh.
So you talk about horror movies and there's a weird noise in the background. I'm not checking that out. I'm not checking that out. No. That's how you stay out of a horror movie.
when we're
Don't go
talking
falling.
about when we're talking about plot twists, I think we are talking about foreshadowing and misdirection.
Absolutely.
Uh, I can't count things on my hands anymore.
You're gonna have to like just do a pat, like a 1 and 2 and a 1.
A 1 and a 2. Foreshadowing and misdirection are powerful narrative tools. Begin by subtly planting hints about future events, creating a sense of anticipation, and then use symbolic elements, recurring themes, or cryptic dialogue to foreshadow without revealing too much. Engage in misdirection by steering attention away from the actual twist, employing red herrings or introducing false clues. Skillful use of misdirection keeps readers guessing and enhances the impact of the eventual revelation. The key lies in balancing subtle clues that reward attentive readers and skillfully diverting attention to maintain the element of surprise.
Yes. And the red herring is a really big one for the average horror reader.
Absolutely.
Anyone who's ever watched an episode of Scooby-Doo?
Scooby-Doo for the win.
Scooby-Doo for the win. There's always the red herring. There's always the person that looks the most guilty. And to the avid horror reader, horror writer, or horror watcher, automatically know that that's not them. That's not the guy. The creepy. Okay, so Urban Legend is a movie that's playing in my head right now as I'm talking about plot twist and diversion.
Mm-hmm.
And the opening scene to Urban Legend is very short. It's a woman driving in the rain, singing the best song to watch anybody ever get murdered to, Total Eclipse of the Heart. And she stops off at the gas station because she needs gas. The attendant, he's creepy. It's dark. He has a stutter. And he tries to get her falsely into the station. She gets in there. He locks the door. She's all freaked out. She maces him and runs back out to her car. He got her in the place because he wanted her. Pause. So of course now we're at the part where the creepy guy lures the girl into the station, right? So we think that he's clearly the bad guy. Bad things are about to happen, and then plot twist that has nothing to do with the ending is he was trying to help her. He noticed something. It was a full service station. He noticed something bad in the backseat of the car. He was trying to warn her. The stutter prevented him from getting it out. So he tried to lure her away so that he could tell her in safety. And it turns out someone's in her back seat. He never get a chance to tell her before she drove off. And that's how we get the opening kill scene.
I like it.
You set it up. You make it obvious. You go into those tropes like we discussed. You feed the audience everything that they want. And then we take it away and we're like, oh no, this is the helpful guy. He could have stopped the entire thing from happening. And
so
she wouldn't let him.
Yep. That's a great example. Another one is Psycho by Alfred Hitchcock.
Classic.
The shocking revelation of Norman Bates as the killer reshapes the entire story, the entire narrative, challenging preconceived notions, which is also what we were just talking about, challenging that.
Exactly.
Preconceived notions.
Psycho also shifted the genre of horror.
Mm-hmm.
We had this, looking into it from the filmmaker's point of view, you had that big star who was the star of the movie.
Mm-hmm.
So you saw it. So the movie starts off, she's the lead character. Everything is happening around her, involving her. She's clearly and obviously the lead. Then halfway through the movie, she dies.
Mm-hmm.
You're like, whoa! Again, plot twist, subverting the expectation, not at the ending. Sorry, not all plot twists are at the end. This one is literally in the middle. That led to, of course, I'm going to mention it, led to Scream and having Drew Barrymore on all the posters and then all the advertising. And then she's not first, She's the second person to die in that movie. She's the second. Everyone's like, who died first? So if you ever get the phone call from what's your favorite scary movie, if Ghostface ever calls you and asks you who's the first person to die, it's not Casey Becker. It's Steve.
It was
the boyfriend, Steve outside. He died first. There's your
twist.
Trivia.
And trivia.
But you're right. Psycho was one of those movies where so many things got subverted. You're watching it, you expect her to live through the whole thing, or at least be your final girl or be there at the end, and she isn't.
Right.
Then it's a whole new conversation. Now it's a whole new movie, because now you're following a whole new character in a whole new space for life.
Absolutely. I think similarly to The Sixth Sense, I want to talk about The Others by Alejandro Amenabar.
The Others, the one that starred Nicole Kidman.
And
that one, it got me. I remember that movie, and it got me. So go ahead and talk about it.
It cleverly misdirects audiences, revealing the protagonists as ghosts in a brilliantly executed twist.
Yeah. I remember watching that movie the first time, and I'm a huge Nicole Kidman fan. And I'm like, what do you mean? Wait a minute. Stop. Wait a minute. Any horror movie that makes you, any plot twist that makes you pause and like
hold up,
recollect,
and you're racking up all the evidence, and you're like,
wait a minute, hold on. And then you're like, wow. And again, it's one of those things that upon second watch, I can't emphasize second watch more important than like in horror or anything. But in second watch, that's when you go back and you realize everybody else belonged there. They didn't. And the signs are right there. And you never saw that twist coming. It was so well executed. And it's one of those things that makes that movie, it's live. Again, it's one of those things that makes the movie stand out. The fact that the movie is as old as it is, I can't even tell you how long ago The Others came out. But the fact that that movie can come out and you say The Others, I immediately remember the movie. I immediately remember the plot twist, and it's one of those endings that stands out. It stands out, and it becomes a vital part of you could almost say like the Hall of Fame of horror movies, because of what it stands for, what it means to the genre. You know what I mean? It's because it shows that example. You can take people on a ride that looks so blatant, so obvious, so this is clearly how it's going to go. And then all of a sudden, shift and go that way. And it's masterful. And anyone, if that's been duplicated a couple of times in different ways. And it's fantastic. So if you haven't seen The Others, I spoiled it. Sorry. But it's really old, so that's kind of your fault.
That's kind of your fault for not watching it first.
Yeah, I try not to spoil a movie that's like 6 months old. Once it's on streaming, it's kind of on you.
Another thought is Carrie by Stephen King. Delivers a gut-punching twist as the narrative shifts from a typical high school story to a telekinetic rampage.
Yeah. I think the thing about Carrie, I feel like you knew something was coming. You didn't know what.
Yeah.
And you didn't know how bad, but you knew it was going to suck. It was going to suck for someone, and it probably wasn't going to be Carrie.
Yeah.
Because everything is set up in the plot, right?
Mm-hmm.
You got this high school girl. Events happen to her. She's clearly picked on. Stephen King for picking up that kind of an event to be the traumatic trigger of everything. Go fig. I'd love to sit down with the guy. Yeah, I'd like to go sit down with this guy. Just be like, what made you do the things that you've done in some of these books. Like,
Yeah.
that's a direction, pretty bold. Okay.
Pretty bold choice. Yeah.
I digress. Coming back. So Carrie sets it up. You see that these people are they're actively going against Carrie, so it's Carrie versus the Mean Girls, and something bad is going to happen. So you're like, is it going to stop beforehand? Is it probably going to happen to her? What happens?
Mm-hmm.
And that's the best part. And the fact that it goes from like 0 to 100 so quickly at the end, you're like almost not ready for that ride. Imagine cruising in the highway at about a good 30 miles an hour, and someone just slams on the gas and you're going 120. That's kind of how Carrie goes.
Yeah.
To me.
Yeah, in my opinion as well. Yeah. These stories masterfully deploy foreshadowing, misdirection, and well-timed revelations, leaving an indelible mark on the horror genre with their mind-bending plot twists.
So, one of the things that you mentioned towards the beginning is the red herring.
The red herring.
What's your favorite red herring? I know that's a tough question.
That's a tough question because I'm a big fan of red herrings and twists at the end and stuff like that, right? So I like false climaxes.
Oh, those are good. That counts.
And
that counts.
So, like, everything leads up to a false climax, and then you have the real climax with the twist.
Yeah.
Right. Who did that well? Old Boy, maybe?
It's been a minute since I've seen Old Boy, but I'm trying to think of, like, if I'm thinking specifically of, like,
not the Spike Lee version, but the original Korean version.
Yeah, I didn't see that.
They have the climax,
mm-hmm.
and then they have the real climax, which is the twist.
Yeah. Oh, right. At that point, yeah. It's just been a while since I've heard of it. I hadn't actually seen it set through the whole movie. So that one.
Oh, you should. There are some iconic shots in Old Boy that should totally be paid attention to.
Here's one that may or may not be what you're thinking, or what some people would think.
No,
Barbarian.
I don't know. I've seen it.
Okay, so I will try my best not to spoil it for you because it's really, really good. But then it's more of a narrative shift in the middle.
Mm-hmm.
You follow characters A and B. They have an interaction. You think that, character B is a bad guy. The fault is a red herring, essentially. Probably my favorite red herring. It's Keith. We'll go into it. So, I forgot. As soon as I said that, I forgot the main character's name. But there's a girl, and she gets an Airbnb. She finds out that the Airbnb has been rented out previously. She's not sure. She's really cautious. She doesn't believe that this is legit. She thinks this guy must be up to something. They try to work it out. She's really diligent in trying to figure out the details, finds out that he legitimately booked it. She legitimately booked it. They used 2 different sites and booked the same Airbnb for the same night. He's like, hey, there's a convention in town. You're not going to find another hotel. I know this will be kind of weird, but why don't you just stay here? We both got the room. We'll call them in the morning because it was late. We'll call them in the morning and we'll work it out. But if you want, you can have the bedroom. It's got a door. The door has a lock, so you'll feel safe. It's cool. Still sounds creepy. And we treat him like he's creepy. Honestly, she's just being super, super cautious and very, very protective of herself. And he's trying his best to be mindful of that without also being a threat. And as that part shifts, that's when things start to go wrong. She goes in the basement looking for toilet paper, finds a secret passageway, and thinks it's a good idea to go down that secret passageway.
Yep. Poor choices. Yep.
I always say horror movie starts when someone makes a mistake. That was a mistake. And then suddenly there's an interaction. We find out that Keith was actually a good guy, and we totally switch and we go in a different direction. The whole movie shifts and changes. We now follow a whole new set of characters, a whole new character, a whole new plot, a whole new plot through line, and we're like, what happened to the other guy? What happened to the other situation, the other story? And
I feel that way about Last of Us, not the show, but the game.
I didn't play it or watch the show, so.
Oh my god. There's a huge twist at the midpoint.
And that's
And
a great place for it.
It's a great place for it, where they take the main character, they put him out of commission, and then the charge has to take over.
Right.
And the scene that where the charge basically not only defends him but defends herself is like, she's not new to handling people and adversaries and stuff like that, but
Right.
there's a whole new context. And that twist in the middle where they take the main character and put him elsewhere, and you get to take the Ellie and make her the main character for a while. And that was probably my favorite. That's the one that really made me go, wow, what a bold choice.
And in the end, what all of these examples basically do is it sits you down and says, hey, I'm going to send you in this direction, right? Get comfortable, get used to the scenery, and then all of a sudden it shifts you into a whole nother, back to driving, and you're driving in a whole other vehicle. You drive partly down the road and you switch cars. And I think it's that switching cars that throws everybody off. It's like, hey, there's more seats, less seats. Now, what's happening? What direction are we going to? Who's the new driver? What does this button do? And maybe a bad example or a bad analogy, but at the same time, when you're going down the road and you're being led in a certain direction, you're being coerced to view things a certain way, you're being coached, trained to look at things a certain way, you start to create expectations. You're like, oh, I've been down this street. I know what it's going to be, what to expect. All of a sudden, it's not the same. And then that takes you out of that moment. And a really, really good script that I read recently from someone from Imaginarium, Amy McCorkle. I was privy to read a pilot of hers, and I'm not going to give anything in her pilot away, but there is something that is mentioned very early in the pilot, and then the story continues, and you completely forgot about it until it's mentioned at the very last line, and you're like, forgot that was happening. And that's what you do.
That's foreshadowing at its best.
That is foreshadowing. That is dropping the clues. That's leading you on. It's like, look at here, look at here, look at here. Wait a minute, what's all that over there? What's going on? And then you got this stuff happening over here.
Here's the beginning, and then we're gonna go around, and then by the time we're over here, we still have our clue from the very beginning, and then we can reference it at the end.
Or even better, if you're so bold, like an Ari Aster, you can put your entire plot of your entire movie in the literal opening.
Yeah.
So if you watch Midsummer, or Midsommar, depending on how people want to pronounce it, if you watch Midsummer, there's a tapestry at the very beginning of the movie. And you're like, oh, this is decorative. Okay, cool, whatever. No, the tapestry literally tells you, if you pause at the very beginning and look at that entire tapestry from end to end, and they do show it end to end, the entire plot of the movie is exposed in that one thing. And it's one of those little Easter eggs that you're like, oh, what is this thing? You see it at the very beginning and you have no clue what it is or what the significance of it is, even if it is significant.
Mm-hmm.
And then after the fact, you're like, wait a minute. And it's like the whole thing is exposed to you from the very beginning and you saw none of it. It's a beautiful thing.
It is.
A beautiful thing. Literally and figuratively, because the tapestry actually was very well done. It's very artistic.
It's nice to look at and also explains the plot.
It does. Oh, I love that movie. I love that movie.
Mm-hmm. So let's see here. Picking a time for your twist. This revelation, as I put it. The goal is to subvert the expectations. Mm-hmm. So the expectation of the guy trying to help the female, and the guy is supposedly the villain.
Oh,
the
like
antagonist.
Barbarian, yeah.
Mm-hmm. And then twisting it at the midpoint.
Yeah.
Right? To show that he is indeed not the antagonist. He is merely a anti-hero trying to, just keep her safe.
He was. He was a good guy trying to do a nice thing.
Yes.
While also respecting the fact that the situation looks really bad from the outside.
Right.
He tried. He really did. Poor guy. But no, okay, so timing. So this happens midway through. And usually about midway through, you figure, okay, we've met the characters, we got the idea of where the plot's going, should have been introduced to at least what the problem is, if not the person causing the problem. Like, you're not going to wait till halfway through the movie to expose Ghostface or Freddy. Sure. Or Michael Myers isn't going to show up an hour in. But with Barbarian, for example, by creating this narrative, right? There's a girl coming into town. She's looking for a job. She's staying at an Airbnb for the interview, right? Then she goes to her interview, or she comes in to get her stuff settled the night before. And then there's this situation. There's this guy. We now introduce this character, this guy named Keith. Everything looks shady. Sure, he seems to be able to account for everything. Every bad guy can. And everything proceeds. The next day, she goes to her interview. The interview is fine. She comes back home. There's now this weird, random homeless guy who's charging at her. We don't really understand what's going on there. He finds this mysterious pathway in the basement. Don't go into the basement. Never go into the basement. Don't read books in Latin. Don't read the Latin.
Don't read it out loud.
I closed the book. I'm not going to do it. She goes down the path. She comes back out. She survives it. And someone's just like, she gets trapped in the basement. She gets out of the basement. And she's like, hey, don't go down there. No, actually, she's like, hey, this is a weird thing. He's like, I'll figure it out. And he goes down there. He goes down this other mysterious path that leads down into a deeper basement below the basement. Ooh. And it's just like, you know what? Everything here looks like it's a horror movie. I shouldn't be going. And she goes. She makes the mistake. This seems like the whole movie. This seems like the plot line of the whole movie. Down there, we're going to find the bad guy. The bad guy is going to get her. And then we are trying to see her try to survive.
Sure.
But that's where the movie cuts.
Right.
Keith dies. And And we cut to something completely different. This guy driving down the highway. He's a producer. He's a movie producer. He's gotten into some trouble. He finds out he's fired from his project, and he now has to liquidate some money.
Mm-hmm.
He has this property that he needs to go ahead and try to sell, but he's got to go look at it first. The property is the Airbnb, and he's there, and it's like days later. We find out it's like days later from what the movie's at the beginning, and we got this whole thing where he's now trying to sell this money. We know how it's connected. We get it. He now has this property to sell. He's trying to sell the Airbnb. All of this is set up here, while all of this was set up here. Obviously, the lines connect at some point, and then we meet the bad guy and then the secondary bad guy, the actual big bad, the bigger big bad. And we find like this whole deeper plot twist that goes into the whole thing. I'm not going to get into that because that's not what the show's for. But the fact that you go so far,
load-bearing bad guy,
yeah. But you go so far and then you just shift the movie. It takes the person out. It's jarring. That's the point of horror. At some point, we're going to jar you, right? We're going to disrupt your normality. That's
right.
That's ultimately our thing, to disrupt your normality. Copyright that. Disrupt your normality, and that's what you do when you kill off Casey in the very beginning of Scream. When you kill off, I forget the Miriam from Psycho. You kill her halfway through. You're like, I'm going this path. There I am over there. How did I get over there?
How did I get where I am?
It's jarring. And now you're trying to figure out, what was the point of all that? Where am I now? What's happening? Why did it switch? How do we get back to where we were? Do we want to be back to where we were? Do I need to remember what was there? Because you trusted that it was going to always be connected. And when it suddenly isn't, you don't know what's happening. And that's what we wanted to do to you.
That is, so I'm playing, again, I'm playing Detroit, Becoming Human, I think it's called. And there are twists within twists in Detroit. So you can very easily make I like to do it at the midpoint personally, because then you don't have something like the sagging middle syndrome, for instance. And so my midpoint that's the twist, that there is no return. All you can do is react. Right? So how else do I put this? The idea is that you do all the tropes, you do all the expectations and stuff like that, and then you do something unexpected. And then they have to react. There's no other choice. They have to respond. So that drives the second half of the book, in my opinion.
The perfect movie to describe what you just said. The Descent.
Yes. Excellent example.
So to show what you're talking about, in The Descent, there's a tragedy, and a woman loses her daughter and her husband. A year later, her group of friends are trying to pull her out of her shell, help her in her coping. And in that process, they're like, hey, we love to go cave diving. That's our thing. Let's get together and do an exposition. Cool. So they go down and they find this cave. The one character finds a cave and sends them. And they get down there and they're doing their cave thing, which, asterisk, that pause there. They do their cave thing, and then they go, and eventually one of the caves collapses. It collapses, and they've lost some of their equipment. They can't go back the way they came. They're stuck in the cave. So now we've set up the plot. We have our characters. They're low on supplies. They're stuck in a cave. The revelation comes that the cave that they thought they were in is not the cave that they're actually in. Juno, one of the characters, was like, I wanted us to discover this and make it special. So it's an unexplored cave. Their hope was to explore it, put their names on it, and put themselves in notoriety. So we don't even know if there is another way out of this cave. So this group of women are stuck in a cave. How do they get out? Sounds like a pretty good movie. The asterisk was I have to give them credit for how they shot this movie, because they shot it so tight that you feel claustrophobic. Even though you're in a big wide room, you feel claustrophobic watching the scene. And again, we're always trying to jar you. That's what horror does. Then you find out that it's not an escape the cave movie. There are creatures that will eat you in this cave. That is the whole new thing. There's your plot twist. That's when you change your motive. Now just think you're muted. That's the thing that you encounter. And now again, like I said, you can't escape. You can't turn around. You literally can't go back the way you came. You have to deal with these creatures. But now you're dealing with both. How do they get out? And how do they get out without being eaten by these creatures? The Descent is a perfect example of what you were talking about. If you get the chance to watch the movie, if you're watching this, watch the UK ending, ignore the US ending.
Oh.
There's a US ending and a UK ending, and the only value that the US ending has is that the sequel connects to the US ending.
Oh.
There you go.
Gotcha.
We are 42 minutes into this, and I cannot let this episode go without talking about how people screw up plot twists.
Ooh, good example. All right, let's go into it.
I got not even just one, it's the. To me, it's the. And I've mentioned this as many times as I possibly can. We've talked about it here. High Tension. Beautiful French horror movie. It's a beautiful French horror movie from like 2003. And if you want to hear me complain about this movie even more, shout out to the guys at the Necronoma.com. There's a whole episode that they did on it. I guess featured on that one. And I go into this in a lot of detail, but I'm going to cover the basic here. So the plot of the movie, two girls go to, Maria and Anna go to Anna's family's house for the summer or for like spring break or whatever. And they're just kind of hanging out. Family's cool. Everyone's kind of hanging out and chilling. And then there's a killer that just shows up at the front door, takes out the entire family, kidnaps Anna. Right? Marie sneaks in and tries to sneaks into the back of the truck before it gets away. And so now we're getting away. The killer's driving the truck. Anna's in the back. She's tied up and bound. And then Maria's like, shh, we're going to get out of this. We're going to get out of this, I promise. They stop off at a gas station. Marie's like, hey, don't worry. I'm going to sneak in here and get help. The killer goes in. He gets some alcohol and all this stuff. It's great. It's cool. So then she goes in. She gets away. She avoids the killer, right? She tries to get help. The police don't know what to do. She doesn't know where she is. They don't know how to help her. She's like, I have to take matters into my own hands. The killer had gone and killed Jimmy behind the counter. She steals his car keys, grabs his car, and drives after the van that has her best friend in it. So there's a car chase, sort of. They get to another location. There's a confrontation. There's a fight. Marie is fighting the killer guy. And then we get to the end. And Marie is victorious. She has defeated the killer. Yes, I'm spoiling everything that matters. Plot twist. She goes to save Anna, and Anna's like, back away from me. How could you do this to me? And Marie's like, what you talking about? Anna's like, you killed my entire family and you kidnapped me. What the deuce? And the plot twist is Marie is the killer. She is the bad guy. She's been the bad guy the entire time, a la Fight Club. And and it sounds like a cool ending.
It sounds like a cool, yeah.
The movie sounds great, right? And if you watch it and you stop thinking right there, it's perfect. It's one
perfect.
of the best horror movies you'll ever watch.
However,
until you think about it. And again, I emphasize the second watch so many times in this episode for this reason. When you go back on the second watch, you realize the killer has existed over here, right? In his van, you see him separately. Over here, Marie is driving Anna's car. So they have Anna's car. They go to the farm. You see everything is on the farm in a wide shot. Where's the truck come from? I've said this so many times, it's ridiculous.
Yeah.
Where's the truck come from? For example, the killer's truck cannot exist in this plot twist. In this plot twist, Marie would have to have access to this truck. It was brought up in that episode that if you saw the truck on the farm somewhere, you could just say she stole the keys and got the truck. That's fine. You can get away with all that. The truck does not exist outside of being with the killer. So when you go back on second watch, you start to look at all the elements that don't line up. How can Marie be upstairs while the killer is, attacking the younger brother outside? All of these plot twists fail. It sounded good on paper. Maybe there was a last second rewrite. Maybe there was a last second, hey, wouldn't it be cool if? But they didn't go back and plant the proper seeds in the proper spots so that we, we're fulfilled. None of that happened. Sounds good if you don't think about it. But that's the problem. Horror movies watchers, horror readers are smarter than you think. You go into it, you got to give them, you got to treat them like they're smart. You got to respect your reader, respect your watcher. If you don't, going to come back, they're going to do 1,000,001 podcasts talking about how bad your ending is.
Case in point. On that line, I also consider Satoshi Kon's Perfect Blue and Paprika. Paprika did it better.
I've heard of Paprika, but I haven't seen it.
There are plenty of twists in Paprika. They're kind of like scattered throughout the whole story.
So like slight shifts more than twists.
It's very Inception-esque. Because they're going through dreams, right?
Oh yeah.
So there are little twists everywhere, and then the big twist at the end is that she is a real person. Big twist is that in Perfect Blue, it was the manager. Doesn't make sense when the manager and the pop star are talking to each other. Doesn't make sense when certain scenes take place. And like the all the evidence, all the clues don't add up to the twist at the end, in my opinion.
And that's one of those things that when you're writing them and you have this idea for a twist, even if it comes late in the writing process, because the beautiful thing about the writing process is that cut and paste exists for a reason. You can start here and end up back here at the beginning. You can do your ending first. Write your ending first if you have to.
Hey, there's some people who do.
If you got a big twist at the end, write your ending first and then figure out how you got there. But then at least you know where there is, and you know how to get there. That's your job as the writer. Figure out how to get there. Just make sure you actually do. You can't drive from Louisville, where I am, drive north on 65 and end up in Florida.
No,
because north doesn't lead that way. But that's essentially like the most simplistic example of of a plot twist. It's driving down a highway that should be taking you to one spot and end up in a different city.
Mhm.
All of a sudden you're in Silent Hill or whatever.
Or
And and or Hollowed Hills. Um and that's fine with subverting attention. Somehow you got off the highway and you didn't realize it. But it's got to make some sort of sense. Uh the second watch is not just something fun with it, we're here talking about. The second watch is so important if you're going to write or a movie or a book, because your reader, if it's good, will watch it or read it again. We were
yeah.
talking about the book Afraid. I've read Afraid so many times. I've read Afraid a lot. I love that book.
Mhm.
And I've watched Scream 1,000 times. I've watched High Tension 1,000 times. There's great movies that I've watched over and over and over again because I enjoy them and how they got from point A to point B. You have to respect that your reader or watcher is intelligent and will figure things out. You can
Right.
show and not tell. We've talked about that in previous episodes. You can show and not tell. You can drop little hints here and there. Trust the reader is going to pick it up. There are people who specifically love to watch movies to catch those little Easter eggs, to find those little tidbits, those little nuggets. It's their whole thing. It's their whole thing. That's how they enjoy the genre.
Mhm.
Trust the intelligence of your consumer and respect that by making sure that what you're doing makes sense to them.
And I think it's a balance between expectations, like
Mm-hmm.
Hallmark movies,
Mm-hmm.
right? Hallmark movies follow a template.
They do.
There are no twists. They go from point A to point B,
And it's a pretty
and
clean drive.
it's a pretty clean drive. The better yet, we want to subvert the expectations. We want to draw out the emotion of that goes along with anticipation,
All of it.
because yeah, they don't you're basically going blind into the future.
Yeah.
After if you do a midpoint twist, like I like to, then there's yo, what's up?
Totally forgot we can do that.
Dante
we're
Eric is a great example of subverting expectations.
Do tell.
Their work is not it's short form, right? So
Okay.
it's like short stories and stuff like that.
Mm-hmm.
But the goal is to draw an emotion from you and then put it on its head. And I feel like he does it rather expertly. Like
Right.
there's an ending, there is, but it's not what you expect out of the story. Like expectations would be that she would die.
Right.
Simple as that. But what if she doesn't?
What if is such a great question.
So the way I come up with my twists is I ask myself, what is the worst possible thing that can happen to my character in this moment? So this is a situation where you got to know like their motivations, you got to know their background, you got to know their desires and stuff like that. But yeah, like my brain just like oozed out of my ears.
Happens to me all the time, especially if I'm live somewhere.
Yeah, it's because I'm live. Yeah,
So
exactly.
one of the stories, while your brain's recapping or
Mhm,
resetting, one of
mhm,
the short stories in my collection was, it starts off with a girl going down this dark hallway. She goes into this room for safety. She clearly knows that she's in trouble. There's a creature on the other side of this room in the dark, and she hears she hears her name from the creature. The creature knows who she is. She's trapped, and then, as we talked about in different episodes, I added, these little elements that kind of stall and draw out the anticipation. And then the twist at the end is that when she wakes up from the dream,
mhm.
she's actually the creature, and the situation is happening now in front of her. But it's from the other angle now. Now we're the creature in the back of the room, and we see the little girl come through, and we recognize ourselves, so we call out to ourselves, and that's why they were calling out in the beginning. So it's
Dun,
just
dun,
a
dun.
right. So again, it's like, if so, you ask yourself, what's the worst thing that can happen to my character in this moment? If I'm trying to write a twist to something, I follow the path that I'm going on, and when I get to a point where I'm like, okay, I know exactly how this will end. What else could I do? What happens if things don't go this way? One of those things where I'm clearly going to go to the end of this road and turn right. What happens if I end up left? What would be left? What would happen? What would happen then? And then I carry on from
Right.
there. So I try to divert from what my own thoughts are and challenge myself to create a whole new scenario, a whole new situation, and see where we go.
And there we go. Yep. All right. Well, yep. Let's see, these stories masterfully deploy foreshadowing, misdirection, and well timed revelations, leaving an indelible mark on the horror genre with their mind blending plot twists. If you liked this video at any point, I encourage you to hit the like button. And if you want to see more streams like this one, then you might want to hit the subscribe button and maybe even ring that bell on the off chance that YouTube actually notifies you when we go live. And we will catch you on the flip side.